Most golf stats will lie to you. Today, expect to learn why tracking fairways hit and total putts is useless, an explanation of the stats pro golfers use, and 4 stats that will significantly guide your practice. You can track those 4 stats with a free, simple stat tracker in the description. Let's get into it.
I'm very excited to go out and make some birdies and some bogeys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, and speaking of that, great transition. We're going to do our birdies and bogeys. Guys, this is the stat episode. We're going to transition. Our birdies and bogeys is actually going to be, if Isaac gets the question right, it's a birdie. If he gets it wrong, it's a bogey. So it's stats trivia. I got 5 questions for him. We're going to go, and we're actually going to start off with an easy par 4, almost a handshake opener, like they like to call it. But Isaac, I'm assuming you're ready?
Born ready. I'm very excited for this. And this is also one of the beautiful things about being able to make up the rules as we go. Birdies and bogeys can be whatever we want it to be. So
it can.
For all 7 people who have listened to every episode, thank you. But also hope you're ready for some banger birdies and bogeys segments.
All right. Comment right now whether you think, is Isaac going to finish under par or over par? All right.
No, definitely over.
I have faith in him, though. There are some hard questions, but we can give him maybe a par if he gets close to it. So we're going to start off. Which player at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am this past week hit all 18 greens in his round on Saturday?
Colin Morikawa. Easy one there.
There you go.
Also
that's what I said.
He lost strokes gained on the green 2 weeks in a row. Winner lost strokes gained on the green. Very interesting.
Very, very, very interesting. Yes. All right. We got a birdie, 1 under par. Just electric.
Nervous.
Made a long putt. We're loving life. So we all know that Scotty Scheffler last year led in dozens of stat categories, too many to name. However, we're going to specifically zone in on his strokes gained approach. All right. I believe he gained over 1.5. Do you know who finished second?
I'm going to say...
I'm telling you, this is a hard one. This is a hard one. It's a very well-known player.
Russell Henley.
Even more well-known than Russell Henley. I'll give you one more guess.
Rory? There's no way it's Rory, no.
No, it was Victor Hovland.
I don't.
Second place. Victor Hovland. Now, I dove into some of his other stats. The reason why he didn't have as great of a year as last year is because his putting and his chipping were atrocious. Yeah. So we're back to even par. We're back to even par. But speaking of Colin Morikawa, the question you got right, do you know roughly around where he finished last year in his strokes gained putting? Hint, hint. You're already on the right track with how he did this week.
I want to say like 132nd or something like that.
I'm gonna give you a birdie for that. It was 156 out of 180-ish players. 156. Very, very poor last year, which is again why the possibility of him winning this week was due to his insane iron play. That was the whole thing with Scotty the last couple of years, and we don't have to dig super deep into pro golf, but he was absolutely lights out with his irons, and then if he had an okay putting week, he'd win. Question number 4, back to under par. The worst player when it comes to chipping last year was Matthew Pavon, catching strays now.
Okay.
When it came to chipping, so strokes gained around the green, do you know roughly what it was per round?
Let's say he lost half a shot around. No, I'm going to say he lost 0.78.
Oh, you should have stuck with half a shot. It was exactly. Lift out the birdie. Lift it out. It was minus 0.5. And the reason why I wanted to highlight that is because he was the worst player, and it's minus half per round. I mean, it just goes to show you their chipping is just, it's lights out. All right, so we are back to even par. Can we finish the round under par? I want to say it's a par 70 golf course. We want to shoot in the 60s right here. Here we go. So this is birdies and bogeys. We're going to end with a fun one. Which player who nearly won a major last year, there's your hint, nearly won a major last year, sits 5 spots off from the bottom in bogeys made per round at nearly 2.97.
Almost won a major last year. So my first thought goes to Sam Burns because
even closer to winning a major. I mean, that hint is
Justin
right there.
Rose?
It is Justin Rose. Justin
Team
Rose made
Rose.
nearly 3 bogeys per round, but that makes sense. That final round in that Masters, he had what? Like 9, 10 birdies.
Yeah.
Obviously, he made a couple of bogeys down the stretch, but yes, that's our birdies and bogeys. Isaac comes out on top.
Great
Maybe
questions
note for
there,
the
Hayden.
editor, put a crown on his head, do something fun like that.
Great
But
questions
everyone,
there.
we're going to dive into stats, and specifically what Isaac and I are going to be doing today is diving into every stat category and explaining it in the ways of what it means, why it's calculated, how it's calculated, and certain aspects that we can really focus on with those stat categories, how it can improve your own golf. But in order to talk about stat categories, we have to address the pink elephant, the big elephant in the room. If you listened last week, right? The pink elephant.
Yep.
We have to talk about strokes gained. And strokes gained can seem like a statistician's stat. It can seem like, well, only the engineers or the mathematicians use that because it's too complex. But Isaac and I are really going to simplify it. We're going to put a graphic up right now. And basically, this graphic is going to show that 2 players can finish the hole with the same exact score. However, if we look at strokes gained, it can tell us how they got there differently and what stat categories that they did well at in order to get them to the certain spot. So in this graphic, you can see we have 2 players, player 1, player 2. They both birdie the hole, but they get there different ways. So player 1, we see he hits a bad drive. It goes in the rough. He's 250 yards out on this 400-yard par 4. So it makes it simple. He's 150 yards out away from the hole. Player 2 crushes his drive 350 yards down the fairway, 50 yards out from the hole. Okay. If we look at this graphic right now, the player 1 has now what we call lost game strokes when it comes to their tee shot, because what happens is there's a baseline for every single tee shot. And your baseline gives you a strokes gained of 0. So if you do better than that shot, you start gaining strokes. If you do worse than that shot, you start losing strokes. Who are you gaining? Who are you losing these strokes to? There's what's called the quote unquote the field. And the field is basically the average golfer for your skill level. So when they talk about it for the PGA Tour, they're talking about, okay, if we compare this player to the average PGA Tour player, this is how much better or worse that they're doing in this specific stat category. So we're going to go to their approach shot. All right. You can see in this approach shot, they both gain shots. It's in the green. It's positive. Player 1, who is in the rough, who hit a bad tee shot, hits it to 33 feet. All right. From 150 yards, 33 feet gains you a little bit of strokes because, again, the baseline average from 150 yards for this golfer's ability is going to be 25 feet. As we go on the other side, player 2, he hits it to 8 feet. 8 feet, great shot, gains even more, 0.15 from 50 yards. Because again, when we're at 50 yards, it should be a tighter spot, tighter dispersion because we're closer to the hole. And so 15 feet would be that average. We're 7 feet under that average. We're doing great. We're gaining putts. This is where player 1, who has lost strokes at the beginning and then gained a little bit on his approach shot, this is where he makes it all up. He makes the 33-foot putt. All right. And so your baseline average from 33 feet is almost nearly at 2. So you're going to make it just as many times as you're going to 3-putt or you're going to 2-putt, right in the same amount. Basically, it gives him a 2. So he gains 1 stroke on the quote unquote field, which is the average of golfers. And then we move over to player 2, 8 feet. 8 feet, if you don't know, PGA Tour average is they're going to make it just as much as they miss it. It's a 50% chance of going in as it relates to the stats. He makes it, he gains half a stroke. Both players get to their total strokes gained for the hole of +1. They gained 1 shot on the field of a 400-yard par 4. That relatively 400-yard par 4, your average strokes gained would be 4. But they did it in different ways. For player 1, he gained a whole stroke putting, which made up for all the mistakes that he did earlier. The mistake of hitting in the rough, not hitting it as far as the other player. However, this other player made it up from hitting a great tee shot, hitting an okay approach shot, and then made the 8-foot putt. So obviously the journey is different, but the total strokes gained against the field is the exact same. If this doesn't make sense to you, it is okay. It is tough to understand. It's really difficult. Isaac, you've been locked in. Am I making sense a little bit?
Yeah, I think, kind of the summary of it is it's the difference between what you did and what your group did, right? So if you're a 20 handicap, that shot we're going to measure against what your 20 handicap group would be at, and there's a ton of data out there about that. The big thing here is that the numbers are great. Knowing where you're good and where you're not good is great. We're going to talk through how that actually affects scoring, but it's also, we have to understand how important each category is. We have to understand that each category is weighted a little differently. Approach play is really important. Off the tee is also important. Chipping is not as important, right? And we also have to understand how to look at these stats. What's important to you for you to get better. So let's talk about the first one here, Hayden. What do we got up first?
First one, and again, we're going to make it easy. We might even go a little bit in the progression of what we did our podcast episodes. We're starting off the tee. And so certain things, how your strokes gained is calculated off the tee. Basically, they look at how far you hit it. Most is the number one thing. If you hit it further, it's actually easier to gain strokes. And hitting it in the rough, while it does give a little penalty to what your strokes gained is, most of the time for the golf courses you play, you're not going to be playing super thick, super high rough. It really isn't going to affect your score as much as it would on a PGA tour, on a competitive tour. Maybe you're playing at a club that does have thick rough, but not many players are currently having that right now. So what is strokes gained off the tee? It's basically that benchmark. Okay. And again, it's for your own stat category, it's for your own golfer group, your own handicap group. And what strokes gained off the tee basically does is it can highlight your strengths and it can highlight your weaknesses. It can figure out if, hey, I'm really accurate, but man, I'm not hitting it far. Or hey, I'm hitting it far, but it's not the most accurate, because it can show the certain holes, it can show the spots where I do really, really good for. We have an 18-hole golf course. There's 14 holes typically where we're hitting tee shots. Man, 12 of the holes I'm doing really good. I'm keeping in play. But when you hit that ball out of bounds or you hit it in the water, instead of having a strokes gained from a poor tee shot be at what we saw in the graphic, a minus 0.15 or a minus 0.3, it's a full shot. You're giving a penalty stroke away. We can really understand and look at our strokes gained off the tee, seeing those number of penalty shots, and that can in turn tell us exactly what to improve. I need to improve. Hey, I'm having penalty strokes. What can I do on the range? We've talked about this tons. How can I create fairways on the range? How can I understand my golf course management, create certain boundaries, aim further away from certain hazards or troubles in order to have the best approaches and the best tee shots that we can have?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the big thing here, right, is we do now have an understanding of hitting it further and being in the rough is okay.
Yes.
You actually, in some cases, you'll give yourself a better chance at making birdie or a better chance at just keeping your score lower. The key here is basically just like findable and hittable is kind of what it boils down to off the tee, right? Hit it really far, keep it between the boundaries, don't end up in a bunker, and you're going to be sitting just pretty. What are some ways that we can improve on this other than just speed training?
Yeah, speed training, obviously, that's how you're getting distance. When it comes to accuracy, look, we talk a lot. You guys talked about it last week. I'm jealous I wasn't a part of the conversation because it was just so good. But visualization, Brad talked about, look, I had a tournament that I didn't feel like I could really prep and prepare for range time wise, as I typically do. And I visualized every single night. Visualization, even visualizing on your way to the golf course, on the range, in the warm up, certain holes that give you troubles. If you can visualize yourself succeeding, you're going to understand that reality is a lot closer to happening than what your quote unquote messed up swing would make you feel.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, let's transition into a stat that sucks, that you can track, but I would not advise it, is just fairways in general. A lot of people go, all right, how many fairways did I hit today? How many greens did I hit? How many putts did I have? The greens one I'm semi cool with. The putts and the fairways one, and we'll get into putts later. But tracking how many fairways you hit is an objectively bad way to look at your round of golf. It's just the percentage of tee shots that landed on the fairway. So if you've got 14 fairways and you hit 9, you're at 64%. Great. That's it. There is no correlation to scoring. Almost no correlation to scoring on fairways. it treats all your misses as the same, right? So like if I missed a fairway, it could have been I was an inch off the fairway, or I hit it into somebody's car 3 blocks across from the fairway. Like there's no, it doesn't give you an idea of how good or bad you were on that hole. So just don't worry about that one. We'll keep it brief on this. If you're tracking how many fairways you hit, right now is a great time to stop. And what I would do instead of tracking fairways, if you don't want to get as granular as getting into strokes gained, is just track how many tee shots you hit that give you a clean second shot. If you can try, even if you're forever away, let's just start there. Did my tee shot give me a clean second shot? This is how you can start actually tracking an off the tee stat that's going to help you improve your practice. So once we get off the tee, we're now moving into strokes gained approach, which once again, we're going to measure versus our handicap group. So if from 150 yards, my handicap group averages 40 feet, great. If I hit to 37, I'm gaining shots, right? Like that was a great shot. I think the conversation about, this week's Riviera, and there was that par 3 that just got lengthened to 270 yards. And there were some comments I saw on Instagram, or not on Instagram, on X, our everything app, Twitter. They were like, "Oh, this shouldn't be a problem for pros. Like, you guys are being over dramatic. Like, all these pros are going to hit this hit this green." I'm like, I don't think you do. You, Hayden, actually, here's a stat I looked up this morning when I was at the gym, because I was, in the Twitter threads debating people. What do you think the median, so the middle of the pack in 2025, was from 250 to 275 yards out
We're
of the
talking
fairway,
proximity to the hole?
proximity on the PGA Tour? Fairway proximity from 250 to 275 in 2025.
I mean, you got to understand that like guys like can just hit bad shots. I want to say it's like 60 feet.
It's 60 feet exactly.
How about that? We're on it today.
Yeah, we're spot on. So you have to be able to calculate against your group. And so the way that I look at strokes gained approach is, if I'm tracking it specifically, I'm going to look at the 25-yard gaps that I struggle at. I've historically struggled from 100 to 125 every single season. And that is one of the areas I work on the most when it comes to random practice, because those yardages are awkward. So I'm working on a clock system. I've constantly worked on that, but that's one area that I struggle with. You'll quickly identify what's the area that you struggle with. So you've got to know, if you know your actual carry distances, the distance that your ball on average carries from the spot that you hit it to where it landed, not how much it rolled out on a simulator, not how far it went when you hit it perfect. What's your average? And then the club selection matters so much based off of that. So understanding course strategy, understanding where you have to aim, and practice from real yardages, practice random, make sure you're tracking this stuff, put some pressure on it. I know this is just a giant ad read for the app. Luke and I are so pumped to get that out in whatever it is, 5 weeks. Like,
yeah,
this is going to genuinely help golfers get actually better at golf. But for now, ask ChatGPT for 14 random numbers between 75 and 200. Track if you hit it within, let's say 30 feet if you're an average golfer. If you're the like in position, quote unquote, so in a position to make a birdies inside of 20 feet, so you could track that too. How often am I getting it in position? That'll give me a realistic understanding of how often I should have birdie putts. Make sure you're randomizing targets, randomize where you're aiming, randomize your yardages. But stroke gain approach is where your money is. That's where your bread and butter is to play really good golf. So far, we're just keeping it in play and hitting it really freaking far. And we are trying to hit it as close as possible to the pin, not without missing the green, because missing the green is a big deal. It will strongly affect your scoring. So speaking of missing the green, what are we looking at there, Hayden?
Well, another spot that is paramount to hit the green is our next stat category: strokes gained around the green, essentially strokes gained chipping. And what we really, really, really want to avoid is, if off the tee we have out of bounds or in a hazard, is our like penalty strokes. If we're chipping, our quote unquote penalty strokes is having more than one chip per hole. It is so important that, and we talked about this in our chipping episode, that our number one goal should be get it on the green. if we're wasting shots hitting multiple chips, trying out chips that we don't ever practice, doing certain things that, well, this could possibly get the ball within 10 feet. Well, yeah, but it could possibly leave you to dump it in a bunker. Like, let's not how about we guarantee that the 35 or 30 feet is the furthest we'd be away, and we get the putter in our hands, and we don't worry about the craziness that can happen from dumping in the bunker, then keeping it in the bunker and doing all this. That's where our penalty strokes come from. And if you were keeping your stats, your strokes gained around the green would skyrocket. And so, what is strokes gained around the green? It's basically the closer you chip it to the hole, okay, the better that you're going to be doing. You're going to have, based on the difficulty of your chip, a certain baseline, and the difficulty can be a number of different reasons. How far away you are from the hole. If you're in a bunker, obviously it's not going to, since strokes gained is such an all-encompassing stat category, it doesn't count if you're short-sided or if you're in a terrible lie or if you're on a downhill slope with a green running away from you. It just counts how your proximity is. However, the more increased difficulty it is from that proximity, or if you're in a penalty area, then the wider your dispersion is going to be. The closer that you hit it, the more that you're going to improve. So certain things that you can do to improve your strokes gained around the green. One, we talked about, let's get it on the green with one chip. Even if that means you thinking that everyone's going to think you're a dork or a loser if you putt it through the rough. Trust me, people aren't going to think that way if you hit it to 10, 15, 20 feet. You don't have to duff a chip. That's the first thing we need to do. The second thing, when we're practicing, have up and down contests. When we're practicing, find some people that you can chip with and you try to gamify it and get a little better. Obviously, finding a technique or a move that will get the ball on the green from any bad lie is going to help us out immensely. It really is. And so I think it's super positive. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we obviously aren't the technique podcast, right? We're trying to develop skills. But like you said, technique is basically everything in this. The two places I would point people are go follow Joseph Mayo on Instagram and go follow Golf Better Tucson. Those two guys are elite. They work with the top players in the world, and they keep it so simple. It is
they do.
Getting the ball on the green is unbelievably simple. Then it just comes down to your ability to read lies. So first and foremost, we got to get this thing on the green first try. And then secondly, we're going to learn how to read lies. And then third, we're going to work in maybe some quote unquote fun shots that we're going to use 10% of the time. But and those two, I cannot recommend, if you don't have Instagram, just look them up on your laptop. Golf Better Tucson and Joseph Mayo. I feel bad that I can't remember. I think his name's Derek, the Golf Better Tucson guy, but phenomenal stuff. They give really good drills and really good technique. If you just follow exactly what they are telling you, you're going to get 95% of the way there, at least.
No, it's good. It's really good because they don't gatekeep. You know, it's not proprietary to them. They want to help people get better at golf just like you and I do. And another better way of getting better at golf is we need to focus on some stat categories that don't matter. If people are talking about this, if your friends are talking about this one, you know, you're always going to put in the back of your mind, all right, they're not a ball knower. They don't understand what's going on. It's up and down percentage. And up and down percentage doesn't particularly matter because it measures two categories and puts them together. And the problem is that one could be way better than the other, but it makes your chipping look good. Up and down percentage is basically when you're chipping, if you have one chip, one putt, that's an up and down. That doesn't factor in, well, I had a terrible chip and then I made a 40-footer. That doesn't factor in, oh, well, I just chip it to a foot every time. My putting must be great because I'm always getting up and down. No, you're just chipping it close. So it doesn't take into account whether the chip or the putt is the good shot. That's why strokes gained is very good. It's very specific. It deals with one category. It deals with one little spot, and you can really look at it, and it can help improve your chipping or your putting or your driving or your approach play in a very specific and orderly way. But up and down percentage, if your friends are talking about it, if the kids are out there, if it's the new hot craze, they don't know. They don't know.
So we've got, once again, I want to boil this down too. We're talking about strokes gained, very specific. You do need to keep track of how far away you are from the hole, what your lie was, all that. And it doesn't take all that much time. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to keep simple stats on your scorecard, we're going to start with did my tee shot give me a clean second shot? Then we're going to go to, and I didn't even run this by you, Hayden. Then we're going to go to how many shots did it take for me to get the ball in the hole from inside 150 yards? That's going to give you a really good idea of if you're scoring from where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Then for up and down, let's keep track of how many chip shots we hit inside of 20 feet. So that gives us a decent chance of making it, not a great chance, but a good enough chance, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to move on to putting here, which strokes gained putting. This I think is the easiest one to understand. The easiest example is on tour. Those players make 50% of their 8-footers. So therefore, if I make a putt from 8 feet, I gain half a shot. And if I miss a putt from 8 feet, I lose half a shot. If you're going to only keep one strokes gained category, this is the one. This is going to give you a very clear understanding of what your issues are when it comes to putting and what to work on. So, for example, I've talked about previously on this podcast, last summer was my worst ever putting, just as a whole. Everything was bad. And it gave me a very clear understanding of my stats showed I was abysmal inside of 5 feet. So I now have two options. I can either start putting it closer when I don't hit it super close and just give myself tap ins, or I need to get better inside of 5 feet. And it's a little bit of both. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. This just sums up putts across your entire round. It's really easy to lose a bunch of shots here. It's really easy to gain a bunch of shots here. It's incredibly volatile. You're going to see massive swings week to week on the PGA Tour. Like we were talking about earlier, Scotty Scheffler, when he would putt just like decent last 2 years, it was like, yeah, I mean, he's going to win because he's really good at the stuff that's not that volatile. So that's also why you'll see like my examples like Charlie Hoffman just cooking on Thursdays at the Masters for, whatever, our entire teenage years. Like, yeah, this dude just putted out of his mind for the first round at the Masters for like a decade. And so, yeah, he was going to be top of the leaderboard on Thursday because he was gaining a bunch of shots there. So speed control matters a ton here when it comes to actually gaining shots on the green, because if you can putt it really close from 40 feet, you're going to gain a lot of shots on that putt. And then you're obviously going to go make the 1-footer or whatever. Anything else to add there? How can I lose a bunch of shots putting? How can I gain a bunch I mean, gaining, obviously you just make more putts, right? But like, from what threshold do I need to like expect a 3-putt?
So the PGA Tour average 33 feet is they 2-putt as often as they make or 3-putt. So it's 2.0 is your expected. Once you get outside of 33 feet, obviously that's when a 2-putt would actually gain you shots. What we really need to be focusing on, and I know you touched on it, and I want to reiterate it, is speed matters so much. Speed matters so much. You having a closed club face or an open club face when it comes from 30, 40 feet, yes, it can move the ball significantly, drastically left and right, but not as much as if I had great speed, it's not going to affect it as much. We want to be really good putters inside 8 feet, and we want to be really good putters outside of 35 to 40 feet. Everything in the middle is, and again, putting sometimes can just be up to chance. The golf courses that certain people are playing, what time of the day did you play it? The ground is going to be a lot more, spike marked up. If you played it early on, is there dew on the grass? If you played it later in the season, are the greens punched? A million different factors. People don't understand that if a green is shaded or if it's more exposed, the grass is just growing quicker. Like the green could be slower than other greens. There's so many factors that go into putting. So when we think of the putts between 10 and 25 feet that you miss them and you get so angry and so upset for, well, one, the best players in the world are not making them at a high percentage clip. So what makes you think that you're going to do that? And then the second thing is like, there's so many factors that go into putting. You can have a great putt and great read and great speed and it doesn't go in, and that's fine. But if we have great putts, great read, great speed from 40 plus feet, you're going to 2-putt majority of the time. If you can have great putt, great read, great speed inside 6, 7, 8 feet, it could absolutely. I mean, you're probably going to be making it more often than not. but we don't need to hyper fixate on the 10 to 25 foot range. And so that'll also kind of move us into another stat category that doesn't matter. Go ahead. Yeah, you got it.
I was just gonna add on to that. We've been, kind of covering what if you don't want to do strokes gained, what should you do? In this case, let's do how many putts are you making inside 8 feet? And how many putts is it taking you to get in the hole from outside of 30? Yeah. That'll give you a great understanding of what do I need to work on? Do I need to work on the scoring area where I'm trying to one putt, or do I need to work on the speed and overall read area where I'm really trying to two putt? And then everything in the middle by working on those two areas, it really helps in the middle there. It's kind of a little bit of Goldilocks effect there. But yeah, continue, Hayden. What do we got?
You're
next?
Good. You're good. If you're, again, if you need some type of visuals for those feet, typically a flag is about 7 to 8 feet tall. So that can also give you another visual. Hey, how close was I? Was I inside that mark? If it's longer than the flag stick, it's going to be outside that. But if it's inside, then we can focus on that. The stat category that doesn't matter, we just talked about strokes gained putting, but what doesn't matter is your putting average or total putts. And the reason that it doesn't matter is because it doesn't get us down to the why. A lot of these stat categories, they give us a certain why. I didn't do well from this area because it was at this number. All right, that's that why. But with total putts, there's a lot of different factors that can go into a good number or a bad number. So we have 36 putts would be 2 putts for every single hole, 18 holes. Okay, a lot of people would look at that and say, oh, you 2-putted every single hole. That probably wasn't that good. All right, well, let's take a player that hit every single green and they 2-putted it. Well, that means that they shot even par, and even par is a great round. It doesn't look into that at all. Let's see a player that has 20 putts. Well, it means they chipped it. It could be I chipped it to a foot every single hole. Again, it doesn't get us down to the why. It doesn't really explain to us, oh, I had this many putts. Well, did you hit the green a lot, or did you have 50 feet every single time we were on the green? What was bad that day? The number of putts, or maybe we need to have a closer proximity. So don't focus on improving your total putts. Focus on improving what Isaac and I are talking about. Look at either strokes gained, and there's tons of different websites. You can type in strokes gained calculator, and it will give you any type of thing, any type of formulaic system to input your stuff, and it'll pump out a number. But if you don't want to do that, absolutely. Inside 8 feet, am I making putts? Outside of, what would we say, 30, 35 feet? Okay, and again, 35 feet, 30 feet would be 10 yards. So outside of 10 yards, are we having 3 putts or 2 putts? Or are we making one every now and then? So that's one to focus on.
I think the overall problem with the stats that we're going, like these are red alert, don't look at these ones. And in all fairness, strokes gained still isn't perfect with this, but a bad stat does not provide context. A bad stat is like pulling a quote out of a book and not providing what chapter it's in. What were we even talking about, right? I think that's a lot of these stats that we're talking about that aren't great. They don't provide a ton of context, and the more context that one stat has, the better. That's why looking at strokes gained holistically is really important. Once again, strokes gained isn't perfect, but it's the best system we've got. And it's really hard to, with all the variables in golf, it's probably as good as it's going to get. Until like AI can take images and figure out context around that and whatever. But I don't even know if our kids are going to get to deal with that. So, that's good right there. Let's move on, Hayden, to, that was kind of the big talk, right? That was the, sit down on the couch and say, hey, here's what strokes gained is. Let's run through some that we saw. There's a billion stats on the PGA Tour website, and a lot of them are really interesting and do have a bearing on scoring. Some of them are interesting and maybe don't necessarily have a bearing on scoring. They're going to pop up on our broadcast. Let's just kind of rapid fire through some of those that we pulled from the PGA Tour website.
Yeah. Greens and regulation. You hear everyone talk about that. What does that mean? Okay. So green and regulation obviously gives you the opportunity to, if you 2-putt on a green and regulation, you're making par. There's 3 different pars typically in golf. This isn't, we don't advocate for the par 6 holes. So any par 6 holes that are out there, we do not recognize you. Different presidents recognize country. We're not recognizing par 6 holes. They don't exist in our mind. But You have a par 3, a green in regulation would be after your first shot. That means you have the ability to hit a birdie putt. You have the ability to hit a par putt. Par 4, 2 shot. Par 5, 3 shots. Greens in regulation are great, awesome to look at, to track, because it basically shows us, do we have scoring opportunities? So if you're watching TV, if you're playing with your friends, they're talking about greens in regulation. It's a really good stat to look at. For the most part, it really just goes to show, like, are they managing themselves well around the course? And is their ball striking adequate, up to par, up to snuff?
Yeah, I think that's put very well. Like you said, once again, this is not as all encompassing as strokes gained approach, but man, it's a kind of like it's like a statistically accurate eye test. Like, yeah, is he? Because it does say, okay, were you semi in position off the tee, and then were you able to at least get it to a position where you're going to have a chance at making the next one, right? Next one I want to talk about is driving distance, which this is something Hayden has become familiar with recently, is hitting it decently far off the tee. I know this is something that you maybe struggled with for. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Big long ball over here. Is trying to throw
driving
some
distance
shade
is
my way.
huge. I was just a little context. I was always like semi-long in high school. I think just because I was tall, or I am tall, and so I just kind of had some leverage. But I really started speed training after my freshman and sophomore year. Started lifting more during COVID, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, I'm at like 190 ball speed. It's like, okay, well now we're hitting it past like literally everybody, and it's such a massive advantage. Even if my thing was I couldn't keep it on the planet, but if you are just getting closer to the green, you're giving yourself a better chance, right? So for example, I would say my freshman year of college, I was probably mid 160s. So I was carrying it 280, right? Um, and so let's say on a 450-yard hole, okay, now I've got 170 in. At that time, because I was also slower, it's probably a 7-iron. Um, so now I'm trying to hit a 7-iron from 170 yards into the green versus, senior year or grad year, Isaac, mid 180s, low 190s. Okay, that thing's carrying 320. I'm 40 yards closer. Now I'm at 130 and I'm hitting it further. So now I'm at a gap wedge. None of this distance stuff is new to anybody anymore, but, um, the ways you can improve this: speed training, and do that wisely. I would do it with a golf ball. If you're going to also be using like the stack, also make sure that you're hitting balls really hard in your training to just keep your face control. Go get fit for a driver. I know that sounds like, once again, self-promotion coming from a guy who did it for almost a decade, but it's so important. I mean, I'll use an example. There was a long drive contest at the Cincinnati Golf Expo. Not to rat out my boys, but they were using a 10.5-degree regular flex driver, and I couldn't get it over like 280. It's like, man, I wasn't as fast as I was, but I mean, like mid 180 ball speed, and just could not get the thing to go. So fitting is incredibly important, and then continue to work on your strike. So make sure you're hitting it out of the center of the face, maybe a little bit high, and let that thing fly. Anything to add there, Hayden?
No. Further the ball goes, it's honestly going to talk to our next category, which is proximity to the hole. But anytime you are closer to the hole, it's an easier shot. I mean, I'll say anytime. 98% of golf shots, when you're closer to the hole, it's easier. So proximity to the hole, very simple. It's very easy. If you see it on TV, if your friends are talking about it, proximity to the hole is how close your ball ended up from the cup. It's typically measured on approaches, but we want to have our proximity be as close as possible relatively, because it's going to make our next shot easier. Okay. So if we're on the green, it's even better. Sometimes when we're short sighted, it could be an easy chip, but proximity to the hole, it's a really easy one to understand. But we like that. We're talking about it because it's a good stat category.
Yeah, and it's going to pop up on your TV on the weekend. So that's an important one. Another one that'll pop up on your TV is scrambling. Just how often do you get her up and down? This is kind of like a mediocre one, because an up and down could be a really easy up and down or a really not so great up and down. But it's a great way to practice, is to try to get up and down a bunch. Maybe not a stat that you necessarily want to put all your time and effort into analyzing and tracking, but you could really easily track your practice by tracking your scrambling. So if you got 15 minutes, 15 random chip shots followed by a putt, and keep track of your percentage, and then try to live up to your average or beat it every week, or if you're a junior golfer, like, okay, my goal is 12 out of 15. I'm going to stay out here until I get 12 out of 15. right? This is a great way for you to progressively overload your practice. I think we've only got one more crap stat, and that's feet of putts made. Now, this is a fun one. This is something they talk about. Like, what was it? I think Scotty had like a crazy good putting day on Sunday at Pebble, and it was like 200 and some feet of putts made. And they're like, "How does it feel to make?" I'm trying to ask like this, but how does it feel to have made the most amount of feet of putts in your career? And he was like, I scored well. Like, that's feet of putts made is cool. It's just the length of every single putt that you made added up, but it's not really productive. Like, it's if you're keeping track of feet of putts made, we're maybe just putting the energy in the wrong spot, right? It feels it's kind of a nothing burger. It's cool. It's cool for the guys that can keep that stat, but also like how accurate are you going to be tracking that if you're stepping it off? Just strokes gained is the way to go from that perspective. And also I would argue get good at taking 3-foot steps. So like I know what it kind of feels like to step 3 feet or a yard. That's a fun one. Like I said, the fun stat, not super productive. I don't know. Anything else in the putting category, Hayden?
Yeah, the last one that I'm going to touch on, and it actually is a fun stat to avoid, is your 3 putts per round.
Mm-hmm.
And so you hear everyone always talk about, the dreaded 3 putt. What we really just want to understand and avoid is that with putting being as volatile as it is, we can really avoid having 3 putts, and it can make your scores go way, way lower very, very quickly. More 3 putts equals higher scores, obviously. What this stat doesn't take into account is where you're 3 putting from. Okay, so be mindful of that. You could be 3 putting from 10 feet, which is a whole heck of a lot worse than 3 putting from 70 feet or 60 feet. But certain drills that we can do, we talk about the pullback drill. So you want to have a lag putt that you hit it a foot from the hole, pull it back the length of your putter, which would typically be 3 or 4 feet. It's going to kind of do 2 drills in one. It's going to work on your lag putting. It's going to work on your putts from that 4 to 8 foot range. But again, we talked about this. Speed is the most important thing when it comes to putting. Having your speed dialed, understanding, knowing your uphill, your downhill, how the greens are running that day, and then just what your tendencies are is going to help that 3 putt stack down go immediately and immensely.
Yeah. Well, last one here, par 3, par 4, par 5 scoring average. Now, this might feel like one of those where you go, how important is that really? But this can kind of expose some strategic weaknesses in your game. So it's going to show like, okay, so let's say I'm struggling on par 3s. Well, there's probably a set yardage there where I'm struggling. That gives me a good spot that I need to focus on. If I'm struggling on par 4s, that can kind of look at, okay, am I in play or am I not in play off the tee? Okay, then how much yards do I have in? Is that the area that I need to work on? Par 5s, do I just need to be going for it more? Am I getting too aggressive off the tee? It allows you to really take a look at where your game is leaking. Is this priority numero uno to keep track of? Not necessarily. Is this an easy one to keep track of? Yeah, because you're already keeping track of score. So this is a easy one to keep track of. It can be something you look at. It can be something you don't look at. But once again, if you got a high par 3 average, you're struggling there. It could be a long iron issue. It could be a strategic issue. You're not just firing at the middle of the green and making your 3s, right? Par 4, it could be that kind of approach, or maybe even a short game problem. Oh yeah, I'm in position, but I happen to miss some greens, and every time I miss a green, I'm terrible. Kind of same thing there, par 5. I'm like, do I need to be going for it more? Do I need to be laying up more? Does my chipping need to get better? It allows you to take a look at the buckets that allow you to score in each one of those categories. I think that's some really good stuff there, Hayden. I want to run back through. If you don't want to if you do not want to keep track of strokes gained, keep track of these 4 things. Was my tee shot in play, and did it give me a chance at the green? What is my scoring average from inside of 150 yards? When I am chipping, how often am I getting it inside of 20 feet? And then what is my putting average from inside of 8 feet? And how many putts does it take me from outside of 30 to 35 feet? If you keep track of those things, it's going to expose the most important parts of scoring, and it's going to allow you to plan your practice better. Because let's face it, the majority of us do not have a ton of time to practice. And even if you do have a ton of time to practice, or if it's your job, you want that practice to be efficient. So no matter how much time you have, we can always be working on how we're optimizing our time and our energy, because I mean, you're playing professionally. I don't want to waste your time, right? If I was to
No.
advise you on what to practice and I gave you a bunch of crappy things to work on based on crappy stats, you're not going to get better and you're going to get frustrated. If I give Luke, who's working 45 hours a week and plays once a week, a crappy set of drills off of crappy stats, he's going to get frustrated. So this applies to everybody. Hayden, I felt like that was a lot of fun talking about stats. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, we nerded out a little bit today, so that was always fun. If you want to keep those stats that Isaac's talking about, the ones that are not strokes gained, the ones that we can do it, just do it on a scorecard. Spend the 15 seconds after every single hole to write it down. It's going to give you a better idea, understanding in that moment for then later on of what I can work on, what I can practice on. But as we touched on, there are some stats out there. It's just noise. Isaac and I always talk about that golf is so closely resembled to life, and there's so many things that are competing and vying for your attention. Don't focus on the stat categories that are too distracted. Don't focus on the stat categories that won't make you a better golfer. If you do, it's just you're putting your time, you're putting your eggs in the wrong basket, right, Isaac?
Spot on. And I'll do one better on those drills that we were just talking about, or the stats we were talking about keeping. If you don't want to keep strokes gained, I'll do one better. I'm going to make a PDF. We're going to make it completely free. We're going to throw it in the description. You can go download that. Has it been made yet? Nope. Will it be made by the time this thing comes out? Absolutely. And then that way I'll put a little tracker in there so you can print it out, or you can copy and paste it into your notes if you want to keep track of those stats. We'll go and make that happen so that you can keep tracking better. But if you want to know exactly what you're doing, make sure you get on the waitlist for the Play Ready Golf app. Launches March 29th, and we're going to be running a crazy big promotion, and we'll have even a few more dollars off with the podcast code when that thing launches. So
Yeah,
very excited for that thing to come out. It fired up. Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, because the Play Ready Golf app, it integrates strokes gained in there for you. The only things you need to input are what you did on the hole, how far away you were, and how the hole ended up, what score you had. So It's very seamless. It's efficient. It's effective. I'm going to do the outro this time, Isaac. Guys, understand that we love you. Time is limited. Waste nothing at Play Ready Golf.
Thanks, guys.